This happened in 2020, right in the middle of the quarantine. My dad got a good deal on renting a house, which was a relief since we couldn't live where we were before. The previous owner had let us stay for 2 years without paying rent, but due to the crisis, he needed us to leave. Luckily, we found a house available in the same area. Interestingly, it was already available for rent when we first moved 2 years prior. The price was surprisingly low, but we didn't question it. It was a perfect opportunity for a fresh start. We moved quickly, my parents, my sister Jimena, and me. Jimena was 15 and had always been a serious girl, too mature for her age. But in the new house, she seemed different, happy even. She sang all the time. They were old songs, melodies that no one in the family recognized. She cooked singing, did laundry singing, cleaned the house with that soft, monotonous tone. At first, we thought it was funny. We joked with her, asked her where she had learned those songs. But Jimena never knew how to answer. However, I was enjoying the house. Having a room to myself was a big improvement. The neighborhood was quiet, and after months locked down by the pandemic, any change seemed welcome. Then one day, everything changed. I arrived home from school exhausted and went straight to my room to take a nap. The house was empty. My parents were at work and Jimena hadn't come back yet. The silence was absolute. I closed my eyes and surrendered to sleep. But then I heard a noise, someone messing with things in the living room. For a moment, I felt a chill down my spine. But then I relaxed. It was Jimena. I recognized her voice singing softly, the way she always did. She passed through the hallway, going to her room. Her room was at the end of the hallway, and mine was in the middle. I thought it was strange that she hadn't called me, but I decided to play a prank. I sneaked out of my room, ready to scare her. When I reached the half-open door, I heard the sound of clapping. Jimena was clapping her hands, slowly, as if she was keeping time to her own music. I thought that was bizarre. I took a step inside. "Boo!" I shouted. The room was empty. Jimena wasn't there. My throat went dry. I looked around, hoping she had hidden, but there was no one there. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I quickly grabbed it and sent a message to the family group chat. "Has anyone arrived home yet?" My dad, my mom, and Jimena replied almost at the same time, "No, we're still on the road." I felt a shiver run down my spine. I heard my sister. I heard her sing, walk, clap, but she wasn't there. At night, my parents asked to talk to me. I felt a heaviness in the air, as if the house was pressing down on us. The atmosphere had changed and something felt wrong. My dad told me to go get Jimena. When I arrived at her bedroom door, I saw something that made me freeze in place. The bedroom mirror reflected an old woman. She was inside the room. She was a cadaverous-looking lady with long, disheveled white hair and deep, empty eyes. She was looking directly at me through the reflection. And then she smiled. A toothless smile. I took a step back, swallowing hard. Instinct screamed for me to run. But instead I pushed the door open, determined to get Jimena out of there. The image in the mirror disappeared. Jimena was there, sitting in front of the mirror, painting her nails. She looked at me confused. "What's wrong?" My knees felt weak. Whatever had been there before. Was it her reflection? I grabbed her hand and dragged her to the living room. My parents were pale, frightened. They said that since we moved in, they had been hearing laughter in the early hours of the morning, doors creaking, and whispers in the living room. My dad admitted that he woke up every night at 3 a.m. and heard someone walking in the hallway. My mom confessed that sometimes she woke up feeling like someone was lying next to her in bed. We didn't think twice. We fled that same night. We stayed in a hotel, all crammed into the same bed. But the worst was yet to come. Around 3 in the morning, the bathroom door creaked open on its own. My mum clutched her rosary, whispering prayers. My dad turned on the flashlight on his cell phone, but no one had the courage to get up. Then we heard it. Laughter, low, hoarse, scratchy, like someone toothless was enjoying our fear. Jimena trembled beside me. She wasn't scared. She was laughing too. "It's too late," she whispered. "She's already inside." The laughter in the bathroom stopped, but Jimena continued. My mom started crying. My dad shook her hard and she fainted, but before she passed out, her lips were still moving, murmuring the melody she sang so often. The next day, we took Jimena to a healer. She underwent weeks of rituals and gradually returned to normal. But I knew that everything wasn't okay. On the first night in the new house, I woke up feeling like someone was watching me. Jimena was standing next to my bed. Her eyes were empty. In the dark, I could barely see her face. "Jimena!" My voice came out shaky. She didn't answer. Then, leaning in close to me, she whispered something. She said she liked me. The air around me turned cold. She said that one day I'll come home. Then she smiled, toothlessly. My grandfather has always been a man of science. He never believed in ghosts, legends, or anything like that. But when night falls and the drink loosens his tongue, he tells this story. And his eyes say everything. It happened in the early 80s, when he was just 18 years old. He and a group of friends were invited to the wedding of an acquaintance in the neighboring town of San Sebastián del Monte. The plan was simple. Take a bus in the late afternoon and arrive before 10 at night. But something was waiting for them on that road, something ancient, something hungry. One of the friends, Ramiro, was in charge of buying the tickets. When they arrived at the station, they discovered that he had bought the wrong ticket. The driver was direct. "Your trip ends here." The group protested. They were still 2 hours away from their destination. "The bus that goes there passes through here. Just wait." And so they were left alone on the road, surrounded only by thick brush and silent hills. Time passed. The temperature suddenly dropped. My grandfather was the only one with a jacket, a persistent gift from my grandmother, who forced him to take it. After half an hour of waiting, they decided to walk to see if they could find any signs of life. That's when Elias, the most playful of the group, ran ahead, laughing. But he stopped suddenly. "Are you guys seeing this?" The road ahead was shining. A light floated in the middle of the asphalt. It didn't illuminate anything around it. It was as if the very air around it was burning, writhing, and then it moved in their direction. The group fled. They ran aimlessly, feeling something invisible tightening their lungs. Fear consumed them. Finally, in the distance, they saw a small farm with lights on. An old man and an old lady were outside, watching them. "Run! Come here!" shouted the woman. They went through the gates and fell to the ground, exhausted. The old man locked the gate with a rusty chain. "You were lucky. If you had passed through the middle of those lights, you would never have returned." The woman brought water and told them to sit down. "What was that?" asked my grandfather. The old man lit a cigarette and replied without emotion, "Witches." The silence was absolute. "They perform rituals on the road. Whoever passes through the wrong way becomes part of the sacrifice." My grandfather thought it was a joke, but as he looked around, he noticed burn marks on the ground, symbols scratched in the dirt, melted candles on the farm wall. "You were lucky," the woman repeated. "Very lucky." When they finally calmed down, the old folks offered them a ride to San Sebastian. But before they left, the woman grabbed my grandfather's arm and whispered, "She liked you." My grandfather felt a cold shiver go up his spine. "What?" The woman looked at the jacket he was wearing. "The witch. She wanted you." They arrived at the wedding long after the party was over. The bride and groom received them with surprise, but soon realized that something had happened. My grandfather told the story. The elders of the family exchanged serious looks. "You passed through the witch's path." And then the groom's grandmother said something that no one ever forgot. "Those who see the light are marked." and for a while, everyone tried to forget. The group returned home the next day without further incident, but days later, when my grandfather hung his jacket in the closet, he smelled a strange odor, like burnt meat. He opened the pocket and found something that shouldn't have been there, a handful of hair, white, long, rolled up like a nest. He threw the jacket into the fire that same night, but sometimes, when he walks alone at night, he smells something burning in the air, and he swears he hears a raspy laugh behind him. My grandfather never went back to that road, but there's one thing he's never been able to explain. On the night he burned the jacket, the flames cast no shadows, and in the middle of the fire, he saw eyes glowing, watching, waiting. My name is Mateus. I'm 23 years old, and to this day, I can't forget what happened in that house. It happened when I was in high school a few years ago. My mother has always been a religious woman, but she also carried a strange mix of superstitions inherited from my grandmother. She said that when my brother and I were children, our family lived in a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais called Rio do Cedro. At that time, our house was near a forest. My mother used to see strange lights among the trees at night, balls of fire that floated and jumped from one branch to another, always accompanied by a thin and chilling whistle. My grandfather, a serious and silent man, told her that those were witches. If you want to keep them away, put an open pair of scissors behind the door, throw mustard seeds on the roof, and hang a red ribbon on the window. My mother did all this, and for a while things seemed quiet. Until one night, she saw a gigantic black bird perched on the light pole in front of our bedroom window. My brother and I, who were babies at the time, cried non-stop until dawn. The next morning, neighbors found strange footprints around the house. Small footprints of bare feet, but there was something wrong. The toes were turned backwards. After we moved to the city, this subject was forgotten. But years later, something happened to me. I shared a room with my brother, Caio, and one night I woke up with him calling me softly, "Mateus, Mateus, turn on the light." His voice was trembling. I thought it was strange since the switch was on his side, but I got up and turned it on. That's when I saw his face. Caio was pale, completely colorless. He's always had dark skin, but that night, it looked like all the blood had drained from his face. "What happened?" I asked. He stared at me and said, "They won't let me sleep. They grabbed me by the neck. They're trying to get in." I felt a deep chill run up my spine. Before I could ask anything else, we heard a bang on the roof, as if something heavy had fallen right above us. Then, footsteps. But they weren't ordinary steps. They were high-heeled steps. I thought it could be a thief. I grabbed a machete that we kept under the bed and told Caio to stay there while I woke up my mother. Before leaving the room, he grabbed my arm and whispered, "If he whistles, don't look up." I froze, but I left. As soon as I entered the hallway, a smell of rotten meat filled my nostrils. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow at the top of the stairs leading to the terrace. She wasn't moving. My heart was beating so hard that I felt my chest tighten. I didn't look. I kept walking, turned on the lights, and entered my mother's room. She woke up startled, and before I could even explain, just said, "They're back." That same night, my mother gathered Caio and me in the living room and spread coarse salt, open scissors, and blessed candles around the house. Only, at 3 in the morning, our cousin's baby, who was visiting us, started crying desperately. My brother's friend, who was also sleeping there, sat up in bed and asked, "Did anyone else hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. "The laughter. Someone is laughing at the window." At the same instant, we heard nails scratching on the glass. We looked at each other in absolute silence until the curtain fell on its own. My mother held a rosary and began to pray Psalm 91, but as she prayed, the floor shook. That's when the glass door leading to the backyard started to vibrate violently. Behind it, there were two silhouettes, One of them was short and thin, with abnormally long arms. The other was impossibly tall. That's when my brother started to suffocate. His body arched backwards, as if someone was pulling him by an invisible rope. My mother ran to hold him as he tried to breathe. The door cracked. The taller silhouette placed its hand against the glass, and we could see that its fingers were long and deformed, with grey claws. My mother kept praying, and I only remember closing my eyes and holding Kaio tight. Then, out of nowhere, absolute silence. The door stopped vibrating. The shadows disappeared, and Kaio could breathe again. The next day, my mother decided to investigate if other houses had gone through something similar. She spoke to an elderly lady on the street, Donna Matilde, who became serious when she heard the description of what happened. Then she said, "This isn't new. They weren't trying to get in, they were trying to go home." My mother was confused and asked what she meant by that. Donna Matilde sighed and said that many years ago our house had been occupied by a woman named Rosa do Cedro. Rosa was feared by the neighborhood because they said she practiced black magic and performed rituals in the woods. One day, the residents revolted and set fire to her house with her inside. But before dying, she would have cursed anyone who lived on that land. The worst part? "Your son, Mateus," said Donna Matilde, looking directly at me. "You have the same name as her son." That night, I woke up with a horrible feeling of being watched. I looked to the side and saw Kaio sleeping soundly. The room was dark, but for an instant, I noticed a horrible detail. The mirror reflected two people in the bed, but there was only Kaio and me there. We moved 2 weeks later. To this day, my mother says that from time to time, she sees lights floating in the backyard of our new house. And me, I never had the courage to look in the mirror at night again.